the 1914 war, as it came to be known to the average young man in Canada, was unexpected, unimportant, and certainly nothing to interfere with hockey, rugby, baseball, and lacrosse. Our gang, in Petrolia, had no one in the militia who went to the yearly camp at Niagara Falls. We never even thought about military things. For memory work, our class had to learn The Charge of the Light Brigade by Tennyson. Why, to this date, I still remember some of it. Then on August 4th, 1914, the Methodist Sunday School picnic group was on the Tajmu steamer at the entrance to Lake St. Clair, about Port Elginak. I remember it was about 10 a.m. We heard a newsboy calling from the dock that England had declared war on Germany. But this news was at the time no more important to us than the news we heard later that day that Detroit had beat the Chicago White Sox in baseball. On reaching home after dark that day, I saw Harry Bolt turning into our house. He had been the trainer for our rugby team and was very popular with anyone who played games of any kind. Later I sat with Harry on the front porch and he told me that he wanted my father to sign a paper that would allow the Grand Trunk Railway to provide him with a ticket to Montreal and then on to England. Harry got away early the next morning. Rugby in 1914 ended in a playoff between London and Sarnia in London. I was asked to referee the game. On the train to London, 4 of us started talking about the war, which had not ended in 10 days or a month, like all the papers had said it would. After the game, we decided to visit the armories in London and try to find out about armory matters and what it was all about. Returning home on the evening train, we saw in the paper that Harry Bolt of Petrolia had been killed while fighting with the Lincolns in the retreat from Mons. By January of 1915, I had enrolled with my buddies, and we were all in barracks at the exhibition building in Queen's Park in London. In June, we were ordered overseas. 2 days later, we sailed for England on the SS Caledonia. On the Caledonia, with 3 decks of horse underneath, our main duty was to feed and water them. Fortunately, on the trip over the Atlantic, we had good weather, landing safely in Devonport, England. By mid-September, our squadron was in France. Immediately moved up to the front by train and into billets near West Utra in Belgium, taking over from B Squadron of the Surrey Yeomanry Divisional Cavalry of the British 28th Division. Even though we kept up our cavalry training through much of the trench warfare of 1916 and 1917, our squadron was mostly engaged in frontier patrol duty, trench mapping, classification of water supply, assisting engineers, artillery spotting, stretcher bearing, and miscellaneous duties. Not much for us to do in cavalry, because we're in static lines surrounded by mud and more mud. I remember a day that made the greatest change in my life. It was 26 September 1916. I was a sergeant major by this time, commanding a 60-man stretcher party in support of 8th Battalion Little Black Devils from Winnipeg, when they attacked the Somme at 6 o'clock that morning. The German Marine soldiers in the lines that day for the first time came out of the trenches to face our Canadian attackers. To me, it looked like 2 teams coming from both ends of a rugby field, meeting in the middle. As they met, the machine gun fire from both sides stopped. It was impossible to tell friend from foe. The Canadians forced the Germans back and took their trenches. It was our job to clear the field of wounded. As we started about 9 that morning, I wondered about the sanity of this world we live in. I was going from shell hole to shell hole, which at the Somme almost interlocked. Then I spotted a boy from Saskatchewan, lying wounded. It looked so much like my younger brother Jack, serving with the artillery. I touched the boy and he opened his eyes. I asked what I could do for him. "Sergeant Major," he haltingly said in a quiet voice, "will you answer a question honestly for me?" When I replied that I would, he continued, so difficult to hear with the noise of battle still all around. "Sergeant Major, do you believe in God?" My answer was yes. "Sergeant Major, will you pray to God for me? I am going to be with him in a few minutes." I knelt beside him, held his hands, and closed my eyes in prayer. In a bare whisper I heard, "Thank you, Sergeant Major. Please go now and help the others." I knew he wanted to be alone with his God. I left to help others but came back later, emptied his pockets, and answered the letters I found there. What happened to me then I will never know. All fear was gone. I walked and went any place I wanted to, without fear. For the rest of that day and night, under continuous fire, we worked as stretcher bearers. By the next day, only 18 of our 60 men who had been on stretcher duty were able to come home to our own lines. 12 had been killed and the rest wounded. As a result of the good work done by the Hussars, I was recommended for and awarded a Distinguished Conduct Medal. In my diary for this date, I have written, "Whoever it was that said war is hell was correct."